Hey guys, this is Don from Padlock Technologies, owner and principal, here to talk about the fourth thing that's very important in Cisco Secure Access, which is the access control policy. Pretty much, the access control policy controls everything that you can do in Cisco Secure Access. It's a little different from the umbrella policy, so I'm going to get to the whiteboard and explain exactly what it is. So, if you are used to something like umbrella, there are three policies in umbrella. There are the DNS policy. Now, the DNS policy happens first because DNS happens before HTTP or HTTPS. Then there is the firewall policy. Now, in all my implementations, nobody has really messed with the firewall policy, and that is for non HTTP and HTTPS traffic. And then the third one is the web policy. Now, the web policy is for HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Now, everybody really messes with this one and that one. No one really does the firewall policy because they have usually, if there's a firewall downstream, people just configure the normal allow rule, right? So if you look at the DNS policies, it's pretty much deny implicit. If you look at the firewall policy, it permits. And then if you look at the web policy, it denies. That's umbrella. Now, the difference here in secure access or Cisco secure access is all three of these policies are one access control policy, ACP for short. Everything gets configured there. Now, what that looks like is I'll draw a big box. So a big box here. This is the secure access ACP. ACP. So what can go into a secure access control policy? So now you got DNS policies that can get put in there. Think of this as a container. You have firewall policies that can be put in there. Right? And you have web policies that can get put in there. Now, in the web policy, there are subsections there. There are decryption policies, or decryption policies that get attached to the web policy. There's this thing called RBI, which is remote browser isolation that can get put in there. There is, what other things you can put in the web-based policy? I believe, if the memory serves me correctly, there are, categories that you can put in the web. Categories that you can put in the web-based policy. There are, tenant control policies that you can put in there. Tenant control. There's a whole bunch of policies that you can put in here. The key difference here, though, between umbrella and secure access is it's all in one policy, and it's really based on top-down processing. So what does that mean? That means you really have to care about the order of operations when you use the ACP rule or the ACP container. Because if you have a web policy, a certain web policy that is above a policy that you want to hit. Let's say, for instance, we have policy 4, which is another web policy. But you want policy 4 to happen first. Well, 4 needs to be above 3 at that point. Because if 3 happens and it's a more generic rule, and say 4 is a more specific rule, the generic rule is going to happen first before the specific rule happens, or the specific rule might not even get hit because it's always hitting the generic rule. It's sort of like a firewall, right? Top-down processing, first match wins. This is a lot different than umbrella. On top of that, you can control everything in one unified policy. You don't have to go through 3 different policies and then stitch them together to make one policy. Everything is one policy. You just have to worry about order of operation. And this policy is, again, unified amongst no matter where the person sits. So if they are in, let's say, headquarters, and they do the backhaul tunnel and they send their traffic up to secure access, this policy controls it. If it's a user with a laptop and they go through secure access, this policy controls it. If it is I already said branch office. So let's say you have branch office, you have data centers, doesn't really matter. All of this is controlled by the secure access policy. The reason why this is great is because if I'm a user and I can bounce between HQ, I can bounce between branch, users other than IT should not be at your data center, but let's say the IT staff is in the data center, they'll all go through this policy. It doesn't matter where the user sits in your environment, they will always get their policy and access controlled by the policy here. Now, there's one thing that I want to talk about that is a little different than umbrella. There is a concept called private resource policies. Policies. Now, these private resource policies still are attached to the ACP. They're not something that sits outside the ACP. They're just rules that are dictated for private app access. Case in point, if you have a web server and you want people to access your web server through remote VPN as a service, you use a private resource policy. The big thing about private resource policies, if you're not using SASE for site-to-site tunnels, but as a whole different architectural design, the big thing here with private resource policies is ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access. This is pretty much the basis of the ACP rule when you start using private resource policies. Because in the private resource policy, the ZTNA you can set is twofold: client-based, or CB, and I already said this before, but browser-based, BB. Now, each one of these are going to have their own posture mechanism to them. Posture mech, right? Basically, it's going to be the front end to allow access to something. So you're going to have to sign in. So I will give you a brief description of this. So say user wants to access web server login page. And this is technically your private resource. And then we'll have secure access, SA, in the middle. So as they go through and they hit secure access down here goes to the ACP and says, okay, there is a ZTNA policy attached to this private resource. And it could be client-based, it could be a browser-based policy. Let's just say it's a client-based policy. So what would happen is Cisco Secure Access, based on this ACP rule that says, hey, there's ZTNA that's going to be applied to this web browser or web application, so to speak. What we're going to do is we are going to activate the module, the ZTNA module, on the user's machine. Now, what's going to happen there, depending on what you implement for ZTNA, again, you could do Entra ID, you could use Okta, you could use Duo Security. But what's going to pop up on this user is a browser, a mini browser that says, log in, identify yourself. They're going to have to log in. Once they log in, the module will turn green, and then that user will actually get access through secure access directly to the private resource, which is this web login page. You cannot do this in Umbrella. You can't do that. right? So that's the benefit of if you're an umbrella person and you want to go to secure access, this is one of the benefits. This is probably the main thing that people, because ZTNA is like the buzzword nowadays. So this is probably the main use case for secure access is ZTNA and web, right? ZTNA and web is probably the two big use cases for this because a lot of people want to start, authenticating users before they even get to a login page, right? I need to know that you are who you say you are before I even allow you to go somewhere else. That is basically the structure of the ACP. So back to this. This is the structure of the ACP. This is one of the fundamental concepts. It doesn't matter if you have backhaul tunnels. It doesn't matter if you have users and groups already provisioned in secure access. If you don't have an access policy that basically tells secure access who, what, and where someone's allowed access to, secure access is pretty much useless at this point. So, with that being said, if you want some more information about this, I do have a white paper in the description below. If you want someone to give you a discovery about, let's have a conversation about implementing this in your environment, you can also have a link. I also have a link in there that says, let's talk at padlocktech.com. It is going to be a discovery call. It's not going to be a sales call. I don't even know if I can help you yet, so I'm not just going to try to sell you on the call. There's no point in that. It's more of a conversation of, okay, where you are right now in your network, where you want to go, and how SASE can be put on top of your network to kind of give you a better visibility and a better network overall in terms of, data flow. Once again, this is Donald from Padlock Technologies. Hope this video was informative, and thank you, and see you later.